Welcome to the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. My name is Camilo Mora.
And my name is Rafael Escamilla.
Thank you, Rafa. Well, today we'll be talking about a very interesting topic. I'm referring to the supply chain of nanostores in East Africa. So this is a very interesting episode for practitioners, for scholars, and for all the people that is interested in knowing more about what's going on in terms of the retail market in the world. So what's the plan for today, Rafa?
Yeah, so today we will be talking about the nanostores. Nanostores are these small, independent, and informal retail micro businesses in emerging markets. They actually control most of the market share in emerging markets. For instance, with shares in India that surpass 90%. In parts of Africa, we also see those types of shares. Whereas in Latin America, we see maybe slightly over 50% of the market being controlled by these stores. And what's very interesting about these stores is that they are really kind of immersed within the local communities in emerging markets. And that kind of allows the manufacturers to serve kind of the most underdeveloped segments of the population. But that requires to have a very complex supply chain in order to manage to get the goods to these stores. So, for instance, one of the big challenges that we observe is, in how do you structure your distribution in such a way that you get the products to the store? And there's many different ways in which this can be done. But especially in the more, let's say, underdeveloped areas, what we often see is that shopkeepers themselves have to kind of transport themselves from their store to a wholesaler, buy these products, and then come back to their store, which is a huge challenge. And of course, we also observe challenges on the financial side and on the information side. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about that, Camilo.
Yeah, I was thinking of associated to these inefficiencies in the logistics, in the distribution. There are financial barriers. Right. So these nanostores are also known as kirana shops in India, or bodeguitas in Peru, or mercadinhos in Brazil, or tiendas de abarrotes in Mexico. They don't have access to credit, to lines of credit. And usually they rely on cash on both ends of the supply chain, with the suppliers, of course, and with the customers. So this implies, other inefficiencies in terms of when the suppliers or the distributors go and visit the nanostores, they have to, collect cash. And that this is also, in terms of security, a huge burden to the agents that visit the nanostores. And in addition, well, I think that there is a huge opportunity in terms of information and digitization in this type of sector is very low, if we compare this with the modern channel sector, right? So there's a low technology adoption. There are many barriers that we have been studying, by the way. And I think that this topic then it's crucial for all the practitioners and scholars that are interested in knowing more about this.
All right. In order to understand from the perspective of a practitioner, we have invited a very successful entrepreneur who has capitalized on these challenges to derive competitive business models in East Africa.
Very good. So welcome back to the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. Today, Daniel Yu is with us. He's the founder and global CEO of Sokowatch. Hi, Daniel. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice. So first, could you please tell us or tell our audience about Sokowatch's value proposition? How would you describe it for the different stakeholders in your business model?
Absolutely. So Sokowatch is providing free same-day delivery of essential goods like rice, soap, sugar, you name it, to small mom and pop stores across Africa. And really the problem that we're solving for these shops is allowing them to just order products whenever they need to at just the click of a button and get those goods delivered to them, as opposed to having to leave their store, travel across town or to an entirely different city to actually buy goods and try to support them back themselves. We also actually provide them with financing to help them grow, which is something that these small mom and pop stores previously also did not have access.
Thank you, Daniel. So I was wondering actually whether you could provide some numbers, right? So how big is Sokowatch at the moment? How many stores are you serving? And what are some of the expansion plans for the near future?
Currently, Sokowatch actively serves over 35,000 nanostores across 4 countries, so Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda. We are actively looking at expanding to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and also exploring other kind of value-added services that we can offer shops as well beyond just the on-demand ordering delivery and the buy now, pay later financing that we currently offer.
Of course. So in this grocery retail sector, what are some of your main competitors then? And then what is your main competitive advantage with respect to them?
Our primary competitor is definitely the traditional wholesalers in the market. So these would be the small firms that have a garage or a small depot of products that just kind of sit around and wait for all these nano store shopkeepers to come to them.
Yeah.
And so really, when we look at what we're doing and the capabilities that we have, obviously it's quite more advanced than these traditional wholesalers. I think we're starting to see other companies that have realized the same kind of opportunities to use technology-driven distribution to serve nano stores as well. Though I would actually say, thankfully, at least in the current markets, the geographies where we operate, we don't really have any kind of sizable direct competitors from that perspective. So we've been given a huge amount of momentum and market to just kind of continue and continue to be the market leader.
Got it. And the follow-up questions, because I was wondering, I mean, when you describe Sokowatch, say this is for free. That's a keyword, right? This is for free for the nano stores, of course. But you have been growing, right? And now I imagine that you have more like headcount. And how does the growth of your business affect the margin of profits? That's because now you have warehouses. I infer larger fleet. So how are you tackling these challenges?
Great question. So I think that the key thing that we've always focused on with Sokowatch is making sure that the unit economics of what we offer are in fact quite solid and sustainable. And so you definitely don't want to be in a situation where you're scaling an e-commerce or an order model where you're losing money on every order, because what that means, the more orders you have, then the more money you're going to lose. And so I think for us the good thing is that we have had, in fact, kind of profitable unit economics, kind of profit after delivering an order for quite a while. And so with that, we felt comfortable kind of scaling up the model and scaling up our infrastructure even though as kind of a very fast growing, kind of venture-backed business, overall as a group, we are not yet profitable. However, at that order delivery level, we are. And so that's provided us with the comfort that, hey, we can really push for fast growth. We can continue to offer free delivery to our customers and still have that work, economically as we scale.
Is it possible for you to drive us a bit through those unit economics? What are some of those drivers?
The exact numbers, unfortunately, I would say are a bit of a trade secret right now. But basically, the revenue model that we operate, right, is that we source goods directly from manufacturers, and then so it's key to know we are operating a first-party e-commerce model, right, a 1P as opposed to a 3P model. Which would be more of your kind of pure play marketplace. And so with the kind of first party model, we actually have our own warehouses, we have our own logistics network in-house. Obviously there are these added costs, but the key thing is that we also have the direct buying and purchasing power to source from the manufacturer, right? So we're the ones who are actually going to Unilever and saying, okay, next month we're forecasted to need 10,000 boxes of soap. And so, what's the best price we can get on soap, next month per box? And we negotiate, we kind of lock in these procurement, cost of goods. And then we're kind of taking those products all the way, from the manufacturer level down to the actual retailer, to the point of sale. And typically offering them the goods at the same, if not even cheaper than kind of wholesale price, while also, of course, offering the free same-day delivery. And because of the kind of verticalization that we're offering between the manufacturer and the retailer, we're able to kind of actually still benefit from the margin difference of the kind of cost of goods purchased to what we ultimately sell to the retail.
Okay, so concerning the expansion, how are you like deciding where to go, right? So that's I think one of the huge questions when you are running a business. Where to go. This is I know that you are like based in Africa and many countries around the world. So how do you decide that?
Great question. So in terms of our expansion strategy, we started here in Kenya, which is basically the hub for most businesses regionally within the East Africa community. And so there is in fact a kind of typical setup that you see with a lot of the manufacturers that we work with, where they'll have their corporate office in Nairobi, but then from that office they'll cover 5, 6, 7 countries in the region out of that one HQ or that regional HQ. And so for us, what we've found is with that existing relationship, it's been quite easy to expand to the surrounding countries, and that's why we initially went to Tanzania. After that, we went to Rwanda, and then the last country that we opened recently was Uganda. And that's been a very effective model for us to be able to kind of leverage the regional HQ, the regional team, to then kind of support our expansion into the local markets, local geographies that they still manage. Now we're looking at starting to expand our reach with some of these multinationals into other parts of Africa. And that takes a bit more work because you have to establish those relationships and there's different dynamics outside of that. What I would also say about the East African region specifically is there is this East African community, which is an official kind of trade group and kind of government, intergovernment institution that actually has a customs union that, at least in theory, allows for duty-free movement of locally manufactured goods between those countries.
In theory.
That's something that's actually, yes. Once again, in theory, a very, very important qualification. But that's something that allows us to start to do interesting things too, which we've started in terms of we're able to source products from manufacturers in Kenya and actually truck them over to our warehouses in Rwanda or Uganda, and then offer those products to the local markets there, and being able to kind of drive some of this, inter-regional trade in order to improve the product selection and the value and the affordability for different categories of goods has been quite powerful as well. So that's something that we've been doing. That's also helpful within the current group of countries that we're currently active in.
So Daniel, from the standpoint of digitization, right, we see that still many of these stores struggle to digitize. Many of their processes are still carried out with pen and paper. Can you tell us a bit about your experience? How have you been able to roll out all those technologies that you're now kind of using in this channel to serve these stores better? And why do you think other players are unable to do this?
Our experience has definitely been one to focus on what is the biggest pain point and what is the minimal, value proposition and kind of product to actually drive that behavior change. Because I think if you just go to a nano store and you say, okay, here's a tool to start managing your inventory, here's a tool to do, point of sales checkout, here's a tool to, manage your finances. All of these things, as you pointed out, they've already been doing for decades just on pencil and paper, and it's going just fine, right? From their perspective. Sure, I think it's easy to look at it and say, hey, we could optimize this if we had better tools, we had better systems. But that's fundamentally not really a pain point, right? In the mind of the nano store, like that's not really a problem that exists day to day. The problem is more around these kind of access to goods and financing that I mentioned, which is saying, hey, it's a big pain for me right now as a shopkeeper to have to leave my store once a week, travel around, buy goods, and then come back. It's a big challenge for me to get financing, working capital, lines of credit, whatever to grow. And so I think we've tried to make that kind of onboarding, that experience, as basic as possible. And that's what's really allowed us to grow in kind of driving customer adoption and expansion to these markets that haven't previously had these kind of services available before, and just kind of making the barrier to entry there as low as possible. So we're able to actually work with customers who don't even have smartphones. Yeah, right. We allow them to place orders via SMS and even through call and stuff like that. And so these are the kind of key things that I think we've innovated on to make sure that the barrier to entry for our service is as minimal as possible.
Right. So how do you think that the pandemic, by the way, has shifted the priorities for the different stakeholders in this context?
I think the pandemic has definitely supported the growth of our business because it's certainly in the initial lockdowns became much more difficult for these nanostores to actually go out and source products directly themselves because there were restrictions on movement. And so a service like Sokowatch actually became very, very critical to keeping these stores and these communities supplied with products during that time. I think for the suppliers, for the manufacturers, it's also really kind of woken them up to the necessity of having digital channels to actually drive distribution as well, because physical retail and especially kind of large format, high population, people movement types of places just become more and more risky during those times. And so making sure that you have digital channels to still drive sales and product distribution are critical. And then I think also just a general point to the resilience too, and for us, the financing that we were able to offer to our customers throughout the pandemic, unlike a lot of digital lenders who really kind of cut off a lot of their activity during that time, we actually kept providing financing. We kept providing our lines of credit to our shops because we saw that they continue to see stable sales, they continue to see growth. So I think also for us uniquely, because we had that insight within our embedded model, we were able to keep providing a lot of these financial services where other traditional financial players had stopped.
Back to you, Rafa.
Yeah, no, so actually the question that I was going to ask relates a little bit more to kind of a comparison between organized retail and this traditional retail channel that you're serving. So how do you think that the unit economics differ, and how is this channel still surviving in the presence of these organized retailers that you would expect are more efficient in a sense?
That's an interesting question. I think that organized retail, does benefit from having larger footprint, and as a result, kind of lower cost per square foot when it comes to actually retailing goods. Obviously, the organized chains have a significant buying power that they're able to actually exert onto suppliers as well. They're typically able to have direct buying relationships with actual manufacturers too. At the same time, I think there are limits to organized retail, especially when it comes to emerging markets. If you look at the urban development of sub-Saharan Africa, for example, there are only so many malls that you can build and people who are going to be able to come shop at those malls, right? This kind of high footprint model that requires somebody to drive a car in to do a week's worth of shopping to then kind of fill up and go home. This is just not the average reality for the vast majority of the population here, right? The average African is not going to be owning a car, is not going to be able to purchase a week's worth of goods up front. And so therefore, what they need is a hyper local retail storefront where they can get their everyday needs, where they can buy, 1 bar of soap, 200 grams of rice, whatever, 50 cents, $1 worth of goods, every day, maybe even multiple times a day. And I think that kind of need for a hyper-local retail is actually only going to grow as you move forward. I think in general with retail, what you're seeing even in the US and these other places is actually the kind of hyper-local footprint is becoming more and more important. And I think in the emerging market context, especially in Africa, which is urbanizing faster than anywhere else, these kind of hyper-local infrastructure is something really key. Now, I think the opportunity with companies and aggregators like Sokowatch is to help actually upgrade these hyperlocal shops into more efficient and more versatile storefronts where obviously, through us getting on-demand delivery so they don't have to shut down for half a day to go source products and all that is a huge boost to their productivity and their offering. But then even the products and the services they offer are there products, are there digital tools that can be offered to these stores to one, improve their own operations. So these are things like a point of sale system or inventory management system. But then also are there services that the shopkeepers themselves can be given to actually on-sell to their consumers, right? So a lot of the digital finance tools, the kind of banking agent networks, cash in, cash out, click and collect offerings where they can basically utilize their footprint, utilize their hyper-local location to then actually offer more and more to their nearby community beyond just selling the rice and the soap. And so I think there's an opportunity for a big transformation on that front, moving forward. And I think players like Sokowatch can in fact be a big part of that because we can kind of aggregate and optimize these service offerings and then also be a distribution point for pushing out not just the physical products, but also these digital services as they're identified and can be kind of integrated into the hyperlocal nanostore experience as well.
Makes a lot of sense. So what role do you see nanostores playing in emerging markets and developing countries within medium and long term?
I think that nanostores are definitely here to stay. I think that there's not going to be any replacement for the hyperlocal retail storefront. I think the services that they offer will evolve and actually increase over time as those nanostores start to offer the different services that I mentioned. Whether it's click and collect, whether it's financial agent services to people in the community, and potentially a variety of other things. You're not going to be able to just kind of replace, the hyperlocal nanostores, with kind of larger, farther out malls with bigger footprints. That's just never going to make sense, for a rapidly urbanizing population that is going to be actually only denser and denser as these cities in emerging markets grow.
Daniel, could you also tell us a bit about some other solutions, maybe that you've seen somewhere else that have kind of inspired you to develop these new technological tools that are now used in Sokowatch?
I think it's interesting. Sokowatch was actually one of the first players globally to actually start working on this business model. I think we chose to do it in perhaps the most difficult region, sub-Saharan Africa, and so that might have resulted in us taking a bit longer to figure out some of these operations. However, I mean, certainly when I look around these days and I see the kind of innovation that's happening and the other types of models that are out there, there's all sorts of interesting players. I think the models that I'm most interested recently are in the B2B2C space. So companies like Shuhuituan in China, SHT that kind of do B2B2C grocery and kind of group buying through nanostores as kind of click and collect points. I think is very interesting. There's a company that we have shared investors with in Brazil called Facili that also has kind of similar model B2B2C that I think is quite interesting. And so, yeah, I think there's all sorts of innovation going on right now, figuring out how to leverage the nanostore in different ways, different parts of the services being provided. And I'm just excited to see what new concepts and companies continue to be built off of that.
Okay, Daniel. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences, your knowledge with our audience. We hope to see more about Sokowatch in the next years, how you continue, pivoting the business and keep it safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you around.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all soon as well.
So, Professor, we just had an extraordinary conversation with Daniel Liu,
Yeah,
CEO,
yeah, really
and
fabulous, right? Yeah.
yeah, he has been innovating in East Africa. And well, what do you take away from Sokowatch strategy? What
Oh,
elements should other players seek to replicate in other countries, Professor?
yeah, not so trivial to replicate, right? I think if you hear him, I think one of the probably biggest accomplishments is that he really understands what's happening on the ground, right? So when he was discussing these pain points, he really took it from the perspective of the shopkeeper, looking at where he could add value from the perspective of the shopkeeper. And you see that some other startups in the market, they tend to think much more of what shopkeepers should do, regardless of their pain points, right? But so I think that's where he really sets himself apart, also as a character and as the experience he has developed. If you look at the business model, I think there are a couple of interesting elements there. So one is leveraging the buying power. So they do take ownership of the goods, and that allows Sokowatch to actually also take part of the margin. This is not unique. I think this was developed first in China under the Ling Xiaotong, the Alibaba brand, who started this some years ago. And there are a couple of other companies that do that in East Asia. In Latin America, I haven't seen that around yet, right? It requires obviously much more investment. It requires also longer term focus. I think that the second element that's relevant is that they serve the stores directly. So this really takes away this pain point of stores not having to go to a wholesaler, right? And that in some markets may be a bit more difficult to replicate because manufacturers, for instance, in many places in Latin America and also in North Africa, what I've seen is manufacturers tend to go directly, definitely the large manufacturers. So that implies the value proposition then needs to be much more towards the manufacturer to really take over that role, which really changes the business proposition quite a bit. I think the third element is something he didn't mention, but I think is actually one of the key, let's say, USPs of the Sokowatch business proposition, and that is that they do 2-hour delivery. Right, so when a shopkeeper places an order, they will get delivered within 2 hours, and this dramatically simplifies the mental accounting that shopkeepers need to do, as compared to other models. Let's say when suppliers deliver directly, typically they would place orders today for tomorrow or today for 2 days later, and this requires a considerable mental accounting to take place in terms of what the need is, how to manage the cash flow, etc. So I think this element is actually also quite critical, and by the way, very difficult to implement, right? So this implies they will need multiple depots in a city like Nairobi, having relatively small vans. They have these tuk-tuk type of delivery vehicles, relatively small vehicles where they can run quick rotations.
Professor, what extensions do you see for Sokowatch's business model?
You should have asked it. You should have asked this question to Daniel, right? So I think that they're really well underway, and that there's still quite a bit of scaling that they can do, and there are huge in their business model, because they take ownership of the goods. There are huge economies of scale possible, right? So I think with the current business model, they can still grow a lot. As Daniel mentioned, they've also been giving trade credits. I think that arm is likely to grow fast, right? Because once they have lots of detailed data on individual shopkeepers, so that allows them also to determine where it's worthwhile giving the trade credit. It also will give opportunities to at least partially go cashless. And as we have seen in our research, there are potentially huge benefits there. I think the other element, because they grow direct, and also with some of the research that we have been doing on the modeling side, is to show if you go direct rather than waiting for shopkeepers to place their orders at wholesalers, it actually increases sales more rapidly. So market growth is also increasing. So in that sense, even with the current model that they have, and now bringing also the trade credit in, I can see quite a bit of growth. Further growth, probably in leveraging the data, right? All the data that they have from the shops, I think this offers huge opportunities, and I'm sure they have the plans already there.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you for sharing as always, your knowledge, your experience, and your insights, because this makes this show even better.
This podcast is brought to you by Tilburg University.